Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of the Soaring Wing Show. I'm your host, Trent Wright, bringing you all things Eagles every day. Today will be part 2 of my NFC East quarterback comparison video. In the previous episode, we discussed Jackson Dart versus Jaden Daniels. I felt it fair to compare the two young guns in the division and not to stack up their resumes against Dak Prescott or Jalen Hurts since they have so very little starting experience in this league. But today we'll be discussing just that, Dak Prescott versus Jalen Hurts. A little disclaimer at the start of the video. Although I am an Eagles fan, I tried to remain unbiased during this comparison, and I do think that Dak Prescott is an excellent quarterback. I have him comfortably within my top 10, right around the 9 to 10 range. Dak has had a very excellent career for a fourth-round pick, similar to how Jalen was a second-round pick. Both of them exceeded their draft expectations by leaps and bounds. So I want to give Dak his flowers at the start. I think he's a great leader. I think his teammates love him and respect him. He is excellent in terms of passing the ball, and in general is also incredibly efficient as well. But I do think Jalen edges him out in some key categories that would lead me to believe that Jalen is not only the superior quarterback, but the quarterback that I would want to have going forward. So let's get started. First category we'll be discussing is winning percentage. Now, before people jump to the comments, I am in the camp that believes that quarterback wins are a true stat. Quarterbacks are the field general of the offense, and not only that, usually the leader and a captain of a team. They have the most profound impact on wins and losses as compared to any other player because they touch the ball on each and every play. So with that stated, let's get into it. Jalen Hurts has a career winning percentage of 69%. He has played in 82 regular season games, going 57-25 in those games, as compared to Dak's winning percentage of 59% in 139 regular season starts, going 83-55-1. So Jalen edges out Dak in terms of win percentage by roughly 10%. In a league where the margin of victory is so small, a 10% differential in winning percentage makes all the difference. That's the difference between your team making or not making the playoffs oftentimes. So even though Dak has put together some excellent regular seasons throughout his career, he also had examples such as last season where he failed to even reach the playoffs. And once you get to the playoffs, that's where the comparison really becomes more favorable towards Hurts. Jalen Hurts has only played 5 years as a starter in this league. He has made 10 playoff games, going 6-4 in those games, and appeared in 2 Super Bowls. Dak, on the other hand, has played 10 seasons, only appeared in 7 playoff games, and went 2-5 in those games, and has never made it past the divisional round. Let's go into efficiency next. I'm going to be using total touchdowns as a reference for both of these quarterbacks because I would believe it to be unfair to not count total touchdowns, as both of these quarterbacks are mobile and account for both rushing and passing touchdowns in terms of how they help their team get to the end zone. So in Dak's regular season career, he has 275 touchdowns for an average of about 1.9 TDs per game, as compared to Jalen Hurts' 173 touchdowns, which equates to about 2.1 TDs per game. So as you can see, in terms of efficiency, they're very similar, but Jalen does still have the slight edge. In addition, their turnover percentages are very similar as well. Jalen Hurts has 65 career turnovers in the regular season, or roughly about 0.79 turnovers per game. Whereas Dak has 122 regular season turnovers, or roughly 0.87 turnovers per game. So Jalen gets a slight edge there as well. So in terms of who's the more efficient quarterback at not only scoring, but also keeping the ball out of harm's way, it has to go to Jalen. When you get to the postseason, though, it becomes almost ridiculous. Jalen Hurts in his postseason career has 21 total touchdowns to only 4 total turnovers, which is roughly a ratio of 5-1 touchdown to turnover ratio. Whereas Dak in his 7 playoff starts has 18 total TDs to 7 postseason turnovers. So you can see that Jalen is clearly more efficient when the lights are brighter, whereas Dak tends to shrink in those moments and has a much worse touchdown to total turnover ratio. So in the regular season, they're basically identical in terms of efficiency. But when it comes playoff time, Jalen is able to elevate his game to a level that Dak simply cannot replicate. Hence why he has never reached past the divisional round. However, We can go into some more categories, which leads me to believe that Jalen is a superior quarterback. Both of them have had excellent supporting casts throughout their career. Jerry Jones may not be a good owner, but his son Stephen Jones is a great GM. They have had many Pro Bowlers on their rosters, both Dak and Jalen, that is, and have played with some incredible offensive players throughout their career. For example, Dak had the luxury of playing with Zeke Elliott in his prime. He played with Des Bryant, albeit at the end of his career, Amari Cooper in his prime, CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, and Jason Witten, just to name a few. Whereas for Hurts, you've had excellent players such as Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert, even though he's usually hurt, and Saquon Barkley, obviously. Miles Sanders was pretty good in his prime as well when he was on the Eagles, although I would argue the Eagles' offensive line makes most running backs look better than they truly are, including Saquon. And to talk about offensive line, both of them have had excellent offensive lines for most of their career. Currently, the Cowboys have what I would call the Great Wall of Tyler. They have 3 players on their offensive line named Tyler, and I just think that's hilarious, but they're all good players. And obviously, we all know that the Eagles have had a great offensive line, really for the last decade plus, mostly thanks to great drafting and Jeff Stoutland as an O-line coach, who sadly is no longer with the team. He has retired. So, supporting cast, I would say it's a toss-up who's had more support over the years. Jalen Hurts has had 25 Pro Bowl selections in terms of himself and his other teammates over the course of his 5-year starting career, whereas Dak has had 85 Cowboys make the playoffs over the last 10 years. So his team slightly edges out Jalen's in terms of players that have made the Pro Bowl during that time span. The time span being the length of his career. If you want to go into recency bias, we can compare last season's stats as well. So Jalen Hurts last year accounted for 33 total touchdowns to just 6 interceptions with a completion percentage of 64.8%. Dak, on the other hand, had 32 total touchdowns to 10 interceptions and a completion percentage of 67%. By all passing metrics, Dak Prescott is the better quarterback. If you wanted to teach your son how to throw a football, you would have him learn from Dak rather than Hurts. He throws for more yards and is in general more accurate. I would argue that Jalen edges him out in terms of deep ball accuracy and deep ball throwing. Jalen Hurts actually leads the league in deep ball touchdowns since 2022, which was the year he really established himself as the franchise quarterback. However, there are some other factors that we still need to consider. Let's look at their career accolades. Jalen Hurts has a Super Bowl MVP to his name, a regular season MVP runner-up in 2022, which I argue he would have won had he not gotten hurt at the end of the season. He also has made 3 Pro Bowls. Dak, in his career, his most notable accomplishment would be his Rookie of the Year season, Offensive Rookie of the Year, that is, and he has also made 4 Pro Bowls throughout the course of his 10-year career. I would argue Dak would have more Pro Bowls to his name if he wasn't injured as frequently as he is, because whenever Dak is the starter and is healthy, he usually does put up really good performances. However, accolades has to go to Hurts. A Super Bowl MVP is the highest recognition that I believe a player can receive. Not second to anything, actually. Regular season MVPs, in my opinion, do not matter as much. Although neither of them have won that award yet. I think both of them actually have a chance to win one of those before it's all said and done, because I do believe both of them are excellent quarterbacks. In terms of who I'd want going forward, I would argue I would rather have Jalen. He's younger. He's 27, going to turn 28 during the course of the season, whereas Dak is almost 33 years old. In terms of durability, they're both built very similarly. Dak is 6'2", 230 to Jalen's 6'1", 223. However, Jalen has been able to take the hits better than Dak over the career and not receive as many injuries. So in terms of who's more durable, the nod goes to Jalen as well. For all of these reasons, I think Jalen Hurts is the superior player to Dak Prescott, and I would much rather have him, especially if it was a playoff game. Although, again, I still think Dak is a top 10 quarterback. Dak's strengths are his leadership, his passing metrics, and his ability to put up production no matter the offensive system. Whereas Jalen Hurts has been more reliant on who his offensive coordinator was. In years where Jalen has a bad offensive coordinator, For instance, Brian Johnson, he ended up with 20 total turnovers that season, which was the most egregious season he had in terms of turnovers. Or when he had Kevin Patullo, and the offense was ranked 22nd overall by the end of the season, even though he had the highest payroll of any offensive staff, any offensive team, that is, in terms of how much they were allocating to the offensive side of the ball in player contracts. So Jalen is more dependent on coaching than Dak is. Dak is pretty much the same Dak no matter who the coach is. Jalen is more reliant on who is calling the plays than Dak is in terms of who is going to have a successful season. However, again, we need to consider the postseason. Dak Prescott only appearing in 7 playoff games over the course of 10 years and only having 2 wins under his belt is nowhere comparable to what Jalen's been able to accomplish in half the time, 5 years as compared to 10. Jalen Hurts' Super Bowl MVP performance was incredible over Patrick Mahomes in Super Bowl 59, and in Super Bowl 57, the Super Bowl that he lost, he played out of his mind as well. He set the Super Bowl record for quarterback rushing yards with 70, and then broke it in Super Bowl 59 with 72 rushing yards. So Jalen Hurts, using his arms and his legs in totality, is better than Dak Prescott just using his arm. Now, Dak is mobile. He does rush for some touchdowns, which is why I included all of the total touchdown metrics in this video, because it would be unfair to count Jalen's rushing TDs but not Dak's. In terms of the rushing TDs, Jalen Hurts has been able to score so many times on the ground over the course of his career because of his ability to squat 600 pounds and the fact that he's just incredibly stocky and stubborn and strong. The 3 S's, stubborn, strong, and stocky. Whereas Dak is able to scramble very well, I would argue. He's pretty mobile, especially for his age, and is able to pick up a touchdown here or there on the ground, but his primary strength is his arm. So again, if you want to run a passing camp, I would much rather have Dak Prescott being involved with that. He is able to put up 4,000-yard seasons pretty consistently, whereas Jalen has yet to reach that metric. The closest he came was 3,800 yards. I believe it was 2022, but he did miss the final 3 games of the season with injury, that being the Saints game, the Cowboys game, and the final game against New York. So, by the end of this video, I hope you guys agree with me that Jalen Hurts is the superior quarterback, not only currently, but going forward. I think Hurts is going to thrive under the new offensive system that Sean Mannion is going to install. I believe we have addition by subtraction by getting rid of A.J. Brown, who was a malcontent and was causing problems in the locker room and with the media. And I just don't see Dak ever reaching the heights that Jalen has, because he's had twice the amount of time to do it and still has not reached a Super Bowl, let alone an NFC championship game. So going forward, I would much rather have Jalen Hurts as my quarterback. I'm glad he's my quarterback, and I believe he is firmly at the top of the division in terms of who is the best quarterback overall. Dak comes in at a close second. Again, in terms of efficiency, they're almost identical in the regular season, but when the lights get bright, Jalen Hurts is able to perform at a level that Dak simply cannot match. I hope you guys enjoyed this video comparing Dak and Jalen Hurts. Let me know what you think in the comments. Until next time, this has been your host, Trent Wright. Stay soaring.